Hello and welcome to Maker Hangar. My name's Lucas Weakley, and today we're going to be continuing with the build of the Maker Trainer. We're going to be assembling the plane today and getting it ready to install the electronics in it. So let's get started. Here are all the parts you're going to need. Now we have the straight edge, the Sharpie, and the X-Acto knife, and also the tape from the previous episode. You're also going to need a couple of wooden dowel rods. We have two 3/8 by 3/8 by 36 inches. And then we have 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 36. The 3/8 are going to be used in the wings, and then the 1/2 inch is going to be used as the tail boom. Now you're going to need a saw to cut these. This is a Japanese blade. You're also going to need some sandpaper to smoothen these out. You're going to need the parts that we had before, that we cut out and covered before in last episode, and then you're also going to need a hot glue gun. Now this is a low powered hot glue gun. You can use a medium powered, but stay clear of the really hot ones because it'll actually melt the foam. And underneath all of this we have our mat to protect the table that we're working on. So we're going to start working on the fuselage, and then we'll move on to the tail and the wing. Okay, so here are the fuselage parts. Now this is the center section, and we're going to put this aside for now, and we're going to build up this area first. So what we're going to do with these joints, like we cut out before, is called a B joint. So this wall actually comes up and rests on top of the side and makes a nice 90-degree joint on both sides, and also makes a nice wraparound joint for when you're landing. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to take our hot glue gun and we're going to fill the seam and then bring it up about 90 degrees. And once we put on the top part, it'll true everything up. So don't really worry about getting it perfect, just get it close. We're going to bring the wall up and over the side, and I use my finger, but you can use a piece of scrap foam to clear off the extra glue that's on there. And just hold it until it dries. And we're going to do the other side exactly the same way. So once you have this, now we can set this aside for now. We're going to put in the tail section right now. So you're going to get your 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch wooden spar. We're going to measure this out to 29 inches. So go from one of the ends, go from one of the ends and measure with your Sharpie 29 inches. So we're going to cut it at 29 inches. This gives us enough space to clear the fuselage, also give it some support on the inside, and then give the tail boom enough support to support the rudder and elevator in the back. So let's cut this. Okay, and then you're going to want to get your sandpaper. Then you're going to want to get your sandpaper and sand off some of the edges. Smooth it off. Now we're going to glue this to the inside of the fuselage. So we already have it marked over here because that is 1/2 inch and it fits there. We need to mark it up in the front. So get your straight edge. And the fuselage it's 4 inches wide on the outside, but the foam is 1/4 inch thick, so it's 3.5 inches on the inside. We're going to measure it between 1.5 and 2 inches, and then that's where it's going to rest. So I can put it in here, and then okay, so once we have that, then now we can glue in the spar. This is easier to do now, and then we'll build the fuselage around it. So pick whatever side you want, doesn't matter. One of them is going to be in the fuselage, hidden forever. So we're going to add glue to this, the whole length, put a very liberal amount onto it. I'm going to flip it over, put it on the inside, and make sure to line it up. Also make sure it's flat. And you can add a weld on the side if you want to, just for some added support. Okay, so now we're going to add the top part, which is the same style as the bottom that we did. So we're going to add glue here, and then the sides come on the bottom, and then we're going to add glue on the edge over here, and this goes on top of the wall. And so we're going to put that in. We're going to glue both sides at the same time because this is just one piece. And then to the edge over here. So now we have a box, and it's still pretty wobbly. So we're going to give it some support. We're going to start in the back, and because we made the cuts on the paper on the inside, these actually now bend in. So you can see how that's going to go over. It lines up perfectly. We're going to just add glue to all 4 edges, the top and bottom, and then bring it in, make sure everything's lined up at the same time. So if you have someone else to help you, this is a good time to have them come by, but if you're doing it by yourself, just be sure to use both your hands right now. And have a lot of glue in your glue gun so you don't run out. You have to work fast. Just make sure everything's lined up. The most important part is getting the edges flush. You can take off the glue while it's still somewhat wet. So that's the back done. Now we're going to focus on the front. Okay, so the front's the same way. It pinches in like this, slightly, and then this front part wraps up and around on the top. So we're going to do this a little section at a time, moving up progressively towards when we get up to the top. So we're going to add glue just to the bottom where the flat parts are, just to slightly fold it up. Glue on the edge, just up to here on both sides. Lift this piece up, push it down onto it, make sure these 2 plates are flush with it, and just hold that until it dries. Okay, once that dries, we're going to do halfway up this main curve. This is going to be the trickiest part to get right, only to there. Bring it up and over, and you're just going to hold it there until it completely dries. Now we're going to add glue to the entire top 2 edges and then finish it off. Fold it over from the front to the side to make sure all the edges line up just like before. Okay, now that's glued, and there's always going to be a little bit extra over here on the edges, so you can get your X-Acto knife and just cut this off. You can go from the top down, and I'm going to do it like this. Just cut along the edge of the fuselage. I'm just getting that extra little bit off. Same thing on this side. Sometimes you'll have this, sometimes you won't. All depends on how it folds up that one time. So now we have this really strong fuselage, but we have a problem. How do we get into it? Well, back when we made this, back when we were cutting out the parts, we marked that intersection where the hatch goes. So we can see it through the tape right here. I'm just gonna mark it. Should be able to see it right there. And then the other one is right here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna draw a line from this crease, which is the top of the hatch. And we're gonna go from here to that dot. And then we're going to go from that dot straight across to the other side. The bottom. So now we're going to cut out on the lines that we drew. I did draw one up in the front where the 2 lines intersect. So I do this freehand. You can use a ruler if you want to. I just find it's easier to follow the line. There we go, there's our hatch. And now we have a perfectly fitting hatch to our plane. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cover this with a different color. I normally do this to make it look like it's a cockpit, so I use the black. And all you have to do is wrap it around the outside, go on the edge. Cut it off to a little bit extra, and then just fold this over, because you won't be seeing the inside. And then just do this the whole way over. Okay, now you have this nice covered cockpit, and you can see it's a nice different color from the rest of the plane, so it stands out. Now, one thing that you want to do, because this is going to be taken off and on a bunch, is to give it a bead of glue on the inside edges, just to strengthen it up a little bit more. And you can set this aside now. While this is open, you can also give a bead of glue on the inside and then up in this curved area, which is going to need some more support. Okay, so now that we have pretty much everything secured on the inside, we've added the bead of glue. Now we're going to add this piece. What this does is it goes inside of the fuselage and acts as a deck for you to put all your electronics on. Now the reason why we took off the paper on this front part is because it folds upwards, so you can kind of crease it right now. So it bends upwards. This is going to bend with the fuselage, and it strengthens up the fuselage as well as hides the spar. That's also giving it strength. So the way that we're going to attach this is paper side, the paper that's gone is facing up. We're going to go up to the bottom, and we're going to add a straight bead of glue to the middle of the foam, which is going to attach to the spar. Now we're going to slide this in all the way to the back of the plane and push it down. I'm also going to add some glue underneath here. Hold this down as well. So now we're going to give it a little bit more support and then add glue to the inside edge all along this deck. So now the interior of the fuselage is done up until we start putting electronics into it. Now we're going to start covering the edges. We're going to line it up with that other piece that we had. Then we're going to cut it on these points. Okay, now we're also going to add a piece that covers up this front part and give it the same offset as below. Wrap it around to where you left off with the other tape. Now we're going to cut this on a couple places, pretty much everywhere that it's flat. You just want all this to lay down flat. Start from the back and move forward. And you can add another extra piece of tape that goes over and meets up with this edge if you want to make it look better, which I'm going to do later. But moving on to the top, add a piece that goes over, comes down the edge, cut it, and then cut it in this one place that it folds. So now that's this whole side fully covered with the edges. I'm going to add one more piece that comes across here, do the same to the other side, and then we'll move on. Okay, so now that we have everything on the fuselage covered, so we have all the side pieces done, and we have it on both sides, and then we have this top area. I'm going to leave the back exposed because the motor mount goes here, and then the wires fish in through the slot to go into the electronics. Plus this gives air cooling, so don't put anything over this back area. Everything on the inside is glued, and then now we have our hatch. We're going to attach this later on, but we're going to move on to the wings right now. Okay, so here are our wings. We're going to focus on this inside spot right now. I'm going to put these other two aside. What we're going to do is we're going to start laying out where our spar is going to be. Now you're going to get your two 3/8 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch spars. You're not going to cut these. You're going to leave them their full length, and one of them is going to be a tamping rod, so you can push out the spar from one of the ends, and then the other one's going to act as the spar. Now they can be interchanged, but they do come from the store pretty rough, so we're going to sand those down really quick. So this is the spar that we're going to use for the plane. And we have all these little pieces that are going to be used as the support. So what we're going to be doing is making up a support area that goes around the spar and allows it to have a channel that we can slide it in and out of the wing. And also will give a bumped up area so when we fold over the wing that it actually makes an airfoil. There's two different types of these skinnier pieces. There's long ones and there's shorter ones. So you need two long ones and two short ones, and then you're going to need one that's going to cover up all of them. So put everything else aside. Those are for the other wings. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the long ones, one of the long ones and one of the short ones. So we have it here. And you're gonna line it up with those lines that we made before. So it should go flush with this chamfered edge, and then it goes flush with this back edge. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna glue this one down first. Put down a bead all the way across, lay it down, and make sure it follows that straight line. Now we're gonna lay down our spar, take our shorter piece, and then put glue on it. And you wanna get this taut up to the other side. Now we're gonna grab our other long piece. This is the short one. This is another one of the long ones. And we're just gonna glue these on top of them like the other. Now that we have these two here, we're gonna take the top cover piece and we're gonna put it flush up against the top side over here. Now you're gonna glue on both of these sides. Don't get the spar because this has to come out. Once you have it lined up, you can cut off the excess using the top plate as a guide. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of extra. And the final thing to do is just to remove the paper on the top of the top plate. This will help it curve over the end. And if you did this right, the spar comes right out. So we're gonna do this to the rest of the wings. The center section is just the same way, just use the smaller pieces, and then the other wing half is exactly the same. I got all the center supports done for all the wings. You can see how I lined them all up using the spar to make sure that the paper edge lines up, which is where it's gonna fold, and also the back edge where the bevel is, where it's gonna sit. I'm gonna focus on one of these sections. We're gonna put this aside. What we're gonna do is we're gonna fold over this top piece and then glue it down as we go. What this is gonna make is called an arm wing. Now this was not invented by me. It was created by a guy named Ed from Experimental Airlines. I'll put a link on the screen somewhere to see some of his videos. He has some awesome videos, you should check them out. He does a bunch of cool things in the RC community. Okay, you're gonna lay your spar down across the paper seam right here. This is gonna act as a point which we're gonna bend the wing. So once you have it on, you're gonna press down as hard as you can, put your hand underneath the wing and push up. We're gonna get it folded all across here. Now once it's folded, it'll pretty much keep to its original form, so we can take it off and we can bend it the rest of the way over. So what we're looking for is to see that these edges line up on the ends, and also the edges over here line up. Now you can give it a little bit more of a fold, and you can adjust the fold over here to make it all line up. Once you're happy where it is, then you can start pressing down this front edge. You can do this all at once with your spar. You're just giving it more of a crease so it's gonna hold that position. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna glue the center section first, lay it down, hold it tight, and then we're gonna glue this edge, lay it down and hold it tight, and then it's gonna form the wing. Make sure it's where you wanted it from before, and go ahead and put even pressure across the top. Then we're gonna add glue to this inside edge. I'm gonna put it to the edge of the table so that we can bring it down, keep it flush. You use flat stuff to add even pressure. Okay, so you're gonna wanna hold it long enough, of course, like before, to make sure that the glue sets. The next step with this is to cut out our aileron. That distance right here is where the aileron goes to the outside, and you're gonna measure 1 inch right there, your straight edge over it. So now this is your aileron, but it, of course it's not moving yet. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna line our straight edge up with the edge of the paper, and we're gonna do a score. So don't cut through all the way, just cut through the foam and not the paper below it. We can slowly break it. And now we have an aileron that only moves up. So we need to do that bevel like we did before. And now we have an aileron that moves both up and down, both ways. But we have a problem. The aileron is soft, it's bendable because it doesn't have its paper backing. So we have to put tape on it. Now, because the bottom's blue, we're going to cover this part with blue. So we're going to fold this over, lay it down like we did before. Give it a little overlap, about 1/4 inch. Then we're going to lay it down on the table and bend it this way, and finally this way. Remember, the tape is going to stick to the paper. It's that little edge inside of there and not the foam. So you want to make sure that it's stuck down really well, and then we can cut off the exit. Now we do have this exposed area right here, so we're going to want to cover that up. But first we're going to add a bevel to it. So same technique as before. So now we have this beveled edge on the end of the aileron. This doesn't have to be done, but it does help with how it flies. So if you can't do it, go ahead. And now we're going to cover it again with the blue, only we're going to wrap it around most of the aileron to give it a double layer, and then we're going to wrap it slightly over the top back here. Then you can see this isn't even, and we do want it even. So we're going to do the same trick as before, where we lay this down. Bend over. And now, just for one more added layer of strength, we're going to go from the top down over the side with the white. Okay, and now we have a nice, strong and stiff aileron, and the hinge is very strong as well. So that's ready for the servo to be installed. We have one more thing that we're going to do on this wing, and that's the end piece. You don't want anything to go into the end, so we're going to add a piece that goes and covers this, as well as we're going to add the stripe to it right now while it's like this. The end cover is going to be in black. You're going to lay it flat up against the edge. And then we're going to come in, we're going to cut it in a couple places like we've done before. I'm going to do the bottom first, because it's the easiest. Okay, now the one last thing that you have to do is to cut out the spot where the spar goes back in. And there we go, there's the opening. So this is the wing cap, and then I'm going to add a stripe that pretty much goes across the wing. Okay, the center section is a lot easier. So it starts off the same way. Put the spar across the center, fold it upwards, and once it's folded, then we can carry it over. And you're just going to make it so it's lined up with both here and here. Fold it over, make sure everything lines up. Now we're going to add one piece of tape that goes across the back. It's going to be white because it's going to cover most of the top, and then just going to wrap around a little bit on the bottom. And that's it, the center section is done. Now that we have our wing covered up, both on the top and bottom sides, and our control surfaces are covered and strengthened, and we also have the wingtips a different color as well. Now we can start assembling the folding wing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these sections, put them in order, and get our spar. Put the spar straight through the middle. Put on one half. Now the important thing to see here is that the bottom edges line up. And you can see how they're touching each other perfectly, and they butt together. That's what you're looking for to get a nice fold. Now it doesn't matter if it's sticking out a little bit, just make sure that the two wings are the same. Now when we folded up the wings, we did it with them all on the spar, so that we were able to fold them all the same as they were going through. So now what we're going to need is some Scotch heavy duty packing tape. And this is what we're going to use to do the seam for the fold. Now you can also use duct tape. You don't want to use the covering tape that we used before because it is very thin and it will break. So let's cut out a piece that's going to be for this part. You don't want to cover up the aileron, but you don't want to cover up this bent part up in the front because that's where it's just going to be folded over. We're going to do the same for the other side. Okay, now that we have these bottom parts done, and we can move on to the top. Now you can see that there's some gaps here, and that's probably what's gonna happen for the most part when you're building this. So this is easily fixed. It's not an issue of structure because the wing is already strong enough with the spar inside of it. So we're just gonna aesthetically cover it with some of the white tape. Obviously it won't fold right now, so we're going to cut this to the inside edge. Okay, so now that one's done. Let's move on to the next one. Don't fold it over. Now we have the tape done for the folding wing. You can take your other spar and we're going to put it through one of the holes on the ends and push out the spar on the other. Once we have it sticking out a little bit that we can grab onto it. Set this on the table and pull out the spar the whole way. Okay, now your wing should fold up like this. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of tape on the inside to help the joint. Do a little strip like this. I'm gonna put it in through the bottom one right here. Get it in. Wrap it around and push it in and lay it down flat. Also gonna put one right here, so just make that one skinnier. Lay it down, fold it over and under. We're gonna do the same for the other side. So we can fold this up and set this aside for now. We're gonna work on the fuselage again. And we're going to cover up the tail. Now you can do this with the same tape. I'm gonna do this blue, make sure to center it. And then you're just gonna fold the sides down. And trim out the extra. We're gonna be covering up the end later. Okay, now focusing on the tail, we're going to measure on the inside where the center is. So the tail is 15 inches long. So we're going to measure 7.5, but we're going to measure at 7.25 and 7 3/4. And so this is going to give us 1/2 inch to where we're going to put our spar. You can do the same thing up on the top. Gives you a rough idea of where to place the spar so it's centered. And then while we're here as well, I'm going to just mark the center line for the tail so we can get this lined up, the center. That's the center of the elevator. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna glue down the elevator onto the spar. Put some glue in that area that we designated before, all the way up to the front. And make sure that the elevator is actually over the spar so you get movement still. Once that's there, we can add some glue on the sides just to give it a little bit more strength. Now while it's like this, we can cover up the rest of the spar. Now we're going to attach the tail, but before we get started, we're going to cut out a little piece so we can just check that this is exactly 90 degrees straight up. If you want to get some of your scrap foam, make sure that it's a 90-degree joint, like a corner of the foam, and then you're just going to want to cut off the corner so that it has room for the hot glue. And now you set this up and set the rudder on top of this, and now you have the perfect 90 degrees. We're going to add glue to the rudder, not this part, but the bottom part that we left exposed. We're going to lay it on our line. We're going to use our little gauge and get it so that it is 90 degrees. Just hold it until it dries. Once it's dry, you can add a bead of glue on the side, give it a little bit more extra strength. And up in the front of the elevator. Once that's dry, it'll be really strong, so just don't bump it until then. Now in the meantime, you do have a couple options for attaching your canopy or your cockpit. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either do this with magnets and put a notch in the front and a magnet in the back, and that requires a little bit of extra pieces. But if you're just starting off and this is your first build, I just recommend putting on some tape. Now, you can hinge it so that there's tape in the back, and then it opens like this, and then you have another piece of tape in the front that holds it down, or you can hinge it this way as well. Now I like hinging it from the back, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use the clear heavy duty Scotch packing tape like before. Just cut out a piece that's long enough for this, and just lay it down. Now when we open it, I'm also gonna add a piece on the inside to give it a little bit more strength. Wrap this around. To add the lock up in the front, we're just gonna take a piece of tape, cut it off, lay it down up here, give it some strength, and then we're gonna just fold over the end to give a little notch for you to grab onto. And yeah, you'll have to replace this after a couple times of taking on and off your hatch, but it acts as a good way to hold it down. Like that. So now you have access to your plane, but it's also secure enough to be able to fly. Okay, now we're going to install the attachment method for putting the wing onto the fuselage. Now the wing is removable, but it also folds back next to the fuselage. So the way that we do this is with rubber bands. Now you're going to need your barbecue skewers, your rubber bands, and a couple strips of Velcro on both sides of it. Now, remember back when we cut out the plans, we cut out those circles, or we cut out the cross in the middle of the circles. Well, we want to find those and cut them out of the tape. This is where the barbecue skewers are going to go through. So we're just going to cut these out. You should be able to see them underneath the tape. It's pretty visible. This one's right here. Okay, and this should act as a good guide for these. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the sharp end of the barbecue skewer and you're gonna just push it through this. Make sure it goes through that side. I'll do this one right now too. And then moving on to the other side. And go through all the way. Line it up with that hole that we just made and send it through. The back one's a lot easier because it's a shorter distance between them. Okay, once we have these through, we're going to put our wing on top. Doesn't really matter if it's centered or not right now, just get it close. What we're going to do is we're going to put the rubber bands on. So just put about 1 or 2 on each. They go diagonally. This is going to help us size up where we need to cut the barbecue skewers, because obviously they don't need to be this long. Okay, let's go ahead and put one that goes across like this. Now that we see the general location of these, we can go ahead and mark them with our Sharpie. It's normally about 3/4 to an inch off from the end. You want to give it a little bit of space so it doesn't come off. Mark it about there. This is all being tucked under the wing, so it's not going to really matter if it's sticking out too far. So now we're going to take these off slowly. Put them down on your table, get your X-Acto knife, and then roll them. This gives it a nice clean cut, and then you break it off in the middle. So now that we have our 2 pieces, we're going to put these through. Find where the other end goes. Center them up, and then we're going to apply some hot glue to the outside around the edge. Push it in and out to get the glue inside of it and make sure it's centered and positioned properly. Okay, to do the front, it's pretty much the same way, only we have access to the inside, so we're going to glue it also from the inside. We're going to add some glue on the inside as well. Make sure it's all centered. And that's it for these posts that are going to hold the rubber bands onto the wing. You can cover them with some tape to make sure that they don't like fray, but it's not important. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the Velcro. Now the Velcro is not going to really hold on the wing, it's just going to keep it from slipping and sliding when you're flying, because the rubber bands don't really hold it when it's moving like this. So we're going to get our Velcro and we're gonna get the hook side, and that's gonna go down onto the airplane. Okay, now is the time that you're gonna see how your wing goes onto your plane. Now, looking at this, this needs to move back a little bit. The Velcro also acts as somewhat of a key to make sure that the wing is in the right position when you put it on to be rubber banded. Okay, so now that we have the Velcro positioned properly, we want to get the front of the plane lined up. You can pretty much eyeball this. The most important thing that you want to get is that the wing is perpendicular to the fuselage so that you don't get any crabbing or anything like that, so you're not flying sideways. I marked the center of this back section. It's 17 inches long from tip to tip, so it's 8.5 inches to the center. You can just eyeball this, line it up, make sure it's straight, and that's going to be where the wing lines up. You can look on the side just to make sure that it's straight. And once you know that your measurements are right, then we can take off the top of the Velcro. Okay, now that we have the top of the Velcro taken off, we're gonna make sure everything's lined up. You wanna make sure that there's some space in between these spars and your wing. You don't want it to be right up against one because then that's gonna cause stress with the rubber bands. So we're gonna lay it down, make sure it's centered over here, and make sure that's centered. Perfect. Come in, make sure it's perpendicular, which it is. Seat the Velcro, make sure that it's all there. You see that holds the wing on pretty well, but the rubber bands are gonna keep it on for the rest of the flying weight, which is the straight force coming up when you're flying. Now you can test the Velcro. Okay, cool. So now we have somewhat of a key to make sure the wing's put on right also. And now you can push out the spar all the way, fold up the wing, and then lay it on top of your fuselage. And now that's how the wings fold up on the side of the fuselage. And the two spars can just be laid down like that. So that's how it folds up for transport. That's it for this episode. Next time, I'm going to show you how to install the electronics and get the plane ready to fly. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.